This story begins several 100,000 years ago and starts in the midst of a drama involving the Anunnaki, the planet Nibiru, and our Earth. Sitchin wrote that he believed that the planet Nibiru was inhabited with life at one point in its history. He wrote that the dominant species on the planet were bipedal in stature and had evolved conscious minds. They were the Anunnaki. These beings were said to be much bigger than we are today, with the women being about 10 to 12 feet and the men being 14 to 16 feet tall, which you might recall relates with the various levels of consciousness we explored way back in Spirit Science 11 and 12. The Anunnaki were not immortal, but they had exceptionally long lifetimes compared to what we're used to. Sitchin's translations estimated their lifespan to be somewhere between 360,000 and 500,000 Earth years. However, another scholar, Lawrence Gardner, suggested the Anunnaki only had lifespans of 50,000 years. The Anunnaki have been described in several different ways. Most commonly, they're depicted as tall, bearded men, and sometimes there are women and children depicted as well. However, they sometimes are interpreted to have been crocodile-like in nature or with reptilian features. If you're familiar with a lot of New Age ideas, you might have heard of the idea of reptilians, which are said to be bipedal lizard creatures and are usually the antagonists in the human story. However, just as there are reptile humanoid statues from ancient Sumer, so too are the Anunnaki also depicted as bird-like, which Sitchin believed was simply their space helmets. Either way, both of these depictions of the Anunnaki, as reptiles or birds, are scarce, with the tall bearded men version being the most prominent. I do believe that regardless of what these beings look like, it's the bearded image of these so-called deities that gave us our common Christian image today, God as an older gentleman with a long beard. To that end, even Sitchin fought the idea that the Anunnaki were reptilian beings, and this was because he wanted his theory to fit with the Bible. To him, the gods could not be in the form of the biblical serpent. Nevertheless, these different depictions have given rise to a lot of online debate about what these beings could look like, if they're even literal physical beings to begin with. Many proponents of the reptilian theory suggest that these beings are actually shapeshifters as well and can change their form at will, which is why there are different depictions of them throughout history. This adds an entirely new dimension to the discussion and gives rise to the popular conspiracy theory that they could even be living among us today in secret. At any rate, for the focus of this series, we're going to keep to the depiction of the Anunnaki as these bearded humanoids, and we'll come back around to the alternate depictions sometime later on. One of the most important Sumerian gods is the Sky Father named Anu. A number of Sumerian texts discuss Anu, but not all agree to every aspect of his existence, such as where he came from or what he actually is. Despite the fact that we previously observed Anu as Uranus, on an allegorical level, Anu could simply be the way that the Sumerians personified the sky, and therefore the Anunnaki are those who came from the sky and outer space. The name Anu is the root word of Anunnaki, which is sometimes translated as offspring of Anu or princely offspring. This is why Sitchin believed that they were the species that came from above and beyond our planet. Anu was the heavenly father, and those who descended from the sky were his children. Once again, we see descriptions of God today as passed down throughout history. In Christianity, God is called the Heavenly Father, the origins of which we find with Anu, the ancient Sumerian god of the sky. According to Sitchin's translations and theories on the subject, the Anunnaki were technologically advanced beings living on the planet Nibiru. Let me also be clear that in Sitchin's book, The Lost Book of Enki, he puts forth a potential version of this ancient past drama, which is really epic, but also very elaborate and long. Honestly, this book would make a great Hollywood movie, just saying. Actually, in a way, it kind of already has, and I just want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to the band and team behind Messengers of the Wind, an animated rock opera that you can watch right now on YouTube. The whole thing is seriously amazing, and I just had to give it some mad props right here and now. As for today's exploration of this theory, we're just going to be going over the essentials. Otherwise, we could literally be here for a week. Sometime around 450,000 years ago, long after the event between Nibiru and the planet Tiamat, the Anunnaki began having a problem with their planet. As we discussed earlier, this planet had a very strange orbit, which took it far away from the sun for long periods of time. Sitchin interpreted from the tablets that the planet had a lot of internal heat, which kept things alive in the long distances of space. However, over time and with the cooling of the planet and potentially even the widening out of its rather sharp orbit, Nibiru grew colder and colder during its long voyages away from the sun, and the planet was slowly becoming less habitable. Sitchin suggested that the Anunnaki scientists decided on a solution that would strengthen their atmosphere and hold heat in for significantly longer periods of time, making it possible to survive in the far reaches of space. The Anunnaki decided that they would gather large amounts of gold and pulverize it into a fine powder and release it into their atmosphere, essentially creating a heat container for their planet. Believe it or not, our scientists have considered the exact same thing, putting light-reflecting particles into our stratosphere to help fix the ozone layer and cool our ever-warming planet. And so, in their attempt to solve their problem, they began looking for large quantities of gold in our solar system, as their planet didn't have the large quantities they needed to coat an entire atmosphere with gold. The Anunnaki had the capacity of space travel, though Sitchin believed that at the time, they weren't much further advanced than we are right now, since they didn't seem to have the ability to travel to other solar systems in their search. They scanned all of the planets in our solar system until they found what they were looking for, large deposits of gold right here on Earth. As the story goes, when Nibiru first came into our solar system, the Anunnaki would deploy a team of workers to Earth's orbit with one singular purpose: to mine gold. In the process of doing this, they also established a way station on Mars, which would help in shuttling the gold back to Nibiru once it was mined. Sitchin also believed that they had, during this time, built the face on Mars as a monument to an Anunnaki who had died there, after playing a pivotal role in finding the gold which was going to save their planet. To lightly touch on the subject of the face on Mars, when you investigate this yourself, you'll find two prominent stories. One is the official response from NASA, which says that it's just a natural rock formation which, due to the way the light was hitting it at the time of the photograph, created this image of a face. But ultimately, it's just an illusion. Generally, those who question this perspective are often subject to ridicule, and so of course we have to go there. It wouldn't be spirit science if we didn't. On the other side of the spectrum, you'll find ex-NASA scientists and astronauts, retired US Army command sergeants, and a university physics professor, along with a number of ancient astronaut and conspiracy theorists who put forth that the face, along with a set of nearby mountainous structures that look an awful lot like pyramids, are the remnants of an ancient civilization. Now, please know that I fully understand this is a huge claim and one that we don't take lightly. So please allow me a moment to share with you what we've come up with while investigating this whole thing. In a lecture given in 2009, Bob Dean, a retired command sergeant major, said the following.
Ladies and gentlemen, my government, NASA, NASA, which many of us in the United States say stands for never a straight answer, proceeded to erase 40 rolls of film of the Apollo program. The flight to the moon, the flight around the moon, the landings on the moon, the walking guys here and there. They erased, for Christ's sake, 40 rolls of film of those events. Now we're talking about several thousand individual frames that were taken that the so-called authorities did not have a right to see. Oh, they were disruptive, socially unacceptable, politically unacceptable. I become furious. I'm a retired command sergeant major. I was never famous for having a lot of patience.
Now, another man named Brian O'Leary, who was a NASA astronaut and a close friend of Carl Sagan for many years, expressed in an interview with Project Camelot that a huge rift was created in their friendship over the face on Mars.